easier to grieve if I had a breath to breathe. I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Coming up on the Sarc Fighter Podcast, the man who wrote and performed this song about sarcoidosis will talk about how the disease and the lyrics are one and the same in his life. And if you listen closely, you will hear that he's likely singing your song.
Trying to keep up the pace, dead man walking, counting down his days, and I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight.
An interview with Mark Steier coming up on the Sarc Fighter Podcast.
This is the Sarc Fighter Podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter Podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Sarc Fighter Podcast. This is where all of us who are fighting sarcoidosis, including myself, can gather. We can learn from one another. We can listen to what other people are saying about the disease, how they're dealing with it, learn how they maybe have or haven't adapted to their new life once Sarc has hijacked it. It's the second time I've used that reference in the podcast here as we begin episode 12. And hijacked, I think, is the perfect word, because that's what happens with sarcoidosis. You're running along fat and happy, and all of a sudden something doesn't feel right, and then something else doesn't feel right, and then you go to the doctor, and the doctor fusses around for a while, and eventually they get to sarcoidosis. And congratulations, now you have an answer. And the answer is you have a disease that nobody knows the cause and nobody has a cure. So we begin to manage the disease, and we're dealing with the side effects of the medicine, and the medicine can be as bad as the disease itself in many cases. And so all of a sudden, sarcoidosis has hijacked your life. Speaking of which, I'm sitting here today on July 1st. The year is 2020, and right now, actually, I feel like a flare might be coming on. I'm waiting to hear back from my doctor. We'll see, but the last time I had this feeling, this tightness in the middle of my back and the additional tingling in my arms and legs, it was because of a flare in 2018, and it really resulted in a pretty terrible 2019. So I am hoping upon hope that either we can get in front of this, or it's not a flare, it's something else. I pulled a muscle, I don't know. And hopefully I won't spend all of the rest of this year on Prednisone. If you've had Prednisone, you know all about that. It's great because it works. It's terrible because of the side effects. But anyway, I'll keep you posted on that, and you can listen to episode 1, which is my story, and you can hear all the sad details there. But today, I'm actually really excited to be bringing you this podcast. Not only because of the content that we're about to hear, but because in my mind, this is working. So we're just a few months into the Sarc Fighter Podcast, and it's something that I wanted to do because I'd been in radio. I'm currently a television news anchor, and so talking in front of a microphone is something I felt like I knew how to do. Figuring out what to say when I'm talking about sarcoidosis, and I'm a lay person. I'm not an expert by any means, other than what my doctors tell me and what I've read and you've all read on the internet. I don't know a lot about sarcoidosis compared to a clinical professional, but I decided I wanted to start talking about it, and I'm just so gratified that it's working. People are reaching out to me. They are wanting to share their stories. They're sharing their stories, and sometimes it's not easy to let the world know how bad you're feeling. And in this world of HIPAA, you wonder, should I be sharing all this personal information? And yet people are doing it. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. I am a dog fanatic, and my wife and I have 4 dogs, including a recently adopted boxer puppy from the local SPCA where my wife works. And so we have lots of puppies come and go, and for the most part we don't adopt them. It's been 8 years since the last one, but now I find myself with 4 dogs, and some people think that's nuts, but I love it. Anyway, if you hear Pippa barking in the background, I apologize. I just closed the door. So back to what I was talking about. I'm so happy that people will come on and they will talk about their stories. And Mark Steier of Alberta, Canada, the man who wrote that song called Zombie, is one of them. And I just want to share a little bit of the email that he sent to me when he was reaching out. So Mark writes, "My name is Mark Steier. I'm from Alberta, Canada. I recently came across your podcast through StopSarcoidosis.org while looking for sarcoidosis-specific COVID information, and I really enjoyed episode 9. I want to thank you for your work with the Sarc Fighter Podcast. I plan to go back and listen to some of the other episodes. A little bit about my story," Mark writes. "I was diagnosed with cardiac sarcoidosis in February 2019, just a few months after my 30th birthday, nearly a year after my early symptoms were misdiagnosed. I was hospitalized due to a late-stage AV block and had an ICD implantation, that's basically a pacemaker. It was and continues to be a very difficult time, as I was only 2 years into my marriage and only 2 months into starting my own professional accounting practice. I'm a CPA. The last 15 months have been challenging as I've been taken on and off prednisone twice. I'm now on my second immunosuppressive treatment as the first was unsuccessful. I am fortunate that the drugs have so far prevented further damage to my heart, but they've had little effect in reducing the inflammation, so I'm not out of the woods by any means. Adjusting to the challenges of the disease has been difficult. I'm no longer able to play hockey. I've been a goalie all my life due to the ICD, and the weight gain and other side effects of repeated high-dosage, long-term prednisone treatments, which have taken a toll on me physically and mentally. Despite the adversity of the past 15 months, I've managed to build my business, strengthen my marriage, and knock off some bucket list travel. All things I'm very proud of. As a young, otherwise healthy guy prior to the onset of this horrible disease, I've been lucky enough to be able to continue living my life despite the challenges and the uncertainty about my future." And so that's a bit, and then Mark goes on to talk about the song that he wrote and the fact that he is what he calls a hobby musician, although the quality on this recording he sent me is just amazing. And he wants to donate all of the proceeds from this song to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. And so the song again is called Zombie. It's on YouTube, and all of the information will be in the show notes of this podcast. So coming up, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those things Mark was talking about in his email. So we'll hear from Mark, and we'll hear snippets of the song that he recorded with his band, by the way, called the White Hot Lizards. That's coming up on the Sarc Fighter Podcast.
Counting down his days, and I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. The
You are listening to a very compelling song about sarcoidosis, and it is written by and performed by Mark Steier in Alberta, Canada. And Mark is joining us now on the Sarc Fighter Podcast. Mark, that is some kind of a song, and I have to tell you, it really touched me.
Oh, thanks, John. I appreciate it. It's always a good feeling when, so somebody else is able to connect to something that you've, created, which is really cool.
Yep. So you have sarcoidosis, and you were diagnosed in early 2019. Would you share with the listeners to the Sarc Fighter Podcast how that came about and how you have it in your heart and how you're dealing with that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'd say for me, it goes back to probably the fall 2017. I started getting some very mild symptoms. I found exercise was kind of getting progressively harder. I went to a cardiologist in January of 2018, and unfortunately was misdiagnosed with exercise-induced asthma and given a puffer. So I kind of battled with that. I was a really active guy. I played hockey, went to the gym 5 days a week. And throughout the year 2018, things just kind of got progressively worse and worse and worse, to the point where I'd be running on the track or on the elliptical at the gym, and I have an Apple Watch, and I thought the stupid thing was broken because I couldn't get my heart rate above 75. And so I'm just dying on the track, just sweating bullets and totally out of breath. And I look at my heart rate and it's 75. So I was like, stupid Apple Watch, right? So I took it in to the Apple store, and they sent it off, and then they actually sent it back to me. And there was a letter from not really a letter, but just a little card in the package saying, it's fine. You might want to see a doctor. Which was kind of funny. So again, I was just like, I think I'm just out of shape. And I was playing hockey at the time. I was a goaltender. And I mean, we're talking beer league hockey, not really all that intense. And all of a sudden, like I could barely make it through the first period. Like by the end of the first period, I was winded, sweating profusely. Like it was just, everything was getting really hard. And by December 2018, I would struggle walking a couple of blocks. I'd lay on the couch and watch TV, and when I get up, I'd have a head rush and nearly black out. And finally, I was at MEC, which is in Canada. It's very similar to REI down there. REI is better, I will tell you that.
Okay.
But I was walking up the stairs there, and I momentarily blacked out and fell into a clothes display. So I went to my parents' house that night, and I was complaining and kind of cantankerous about the whole thing. And my dad just said, go to the university hospital. They, bring your phone charger, bring your phone, bring your headphones, and just camp out there all day. Go to the ER and just not leave until somebody sees you. So I did just that. I spent the day there, and I was a healthy, otherwise, like I looked healthy. My symptoms weren't particularly bad when I was sitting still. So the ER wasn't particularly happy to have me there. But by law, they have to if you come in complaining of heart problems, they have to do an ECG on you.
That's a Canadian law, I would assume.
I would assume so, yeah. And so the doctor did, and he said, okay, no, something does look funny here. We're going to bring a cardiologist in on this. So you just sit tight. And they brought down this cardiology student, like one of the fellows. And he looked at it and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. We got to bring like my guy in, the actual cardiologist. And so he came in and he said, listen, like something's wrong. We can tell you what it is. And what it is was oh gosh, I can't remember, but basically it's when your heart rate gets really, really slow.
Okay.
And it's irregular. Like there's an irregular rhythm to it.
Arrhythmia, is that what it is?
I think maybe something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And so he said, like, we're gonna have to put you on a Holter device for 2 weeks. So you wear it. He said, do what you would normally do, work out. Every time you feel these symptoms come on, hit the button, it'll take a 30-second or a 1-minute recording. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, I brought the device back and they uploaded the data. And I didn't hear anything for a while. And so I kind of waited for a few weeks, and symptoms were still quite bad. And so I ended up calling that part of the hospital and just saying, hey, you know what, like, I did this Holter device thing. I haven't heard back from anybody. And I mean, in Canada, we have a great healthcare system, but it certainly can be a bit slow at times. So they said, well, the doctor hasn't even looked at it yet, so we'll send him a message to take a look at it. And later that day, I got a call from the cardiologist, and he said, are you alone right now? And I said, yeah. And he said, don't be.
Whoa.
So he said, get somebody there, don't drive. And he said, we're going to call you in 2 hours when there's a bed freed up at the Heart Institute, the Mazankowski in Edmonton, which is one of the leading cardiac wards probably in North America, which I'm very fortunate to live very close to. And he said, then get somebody to drive you, pack for a week or more. And so I was freaking out. At this stage in my life in December 2018, I had just quit my job. So I was with a chartered accounting firm for just over 9 years. I had made the decision in December, right at Christmas time, to quit my job and start my own accounting firm with a partner of mine who was a coworker. And so when this happened, we were about a month and a half into our new business venture, and so it was a very stressful time when I was admitted.
Wow. So you go to the hospital, and they know that there's something wrong, but they don't know it's sarcoidosis yet. Now, did you go through a misdiagnosis, or what happened from that point forward?
No, the Mazankowski, they were very, very good. So they brought in a number of experts right away. They immediately, the minute I got into the hospital, they hooked me up to all the wires and, kind of the 24/7 monitoring. They did, I think I did a MRI that first day, I think. Certainly an X-ray, blood work, and so yeah, I got there in the evening, so it would have been the next day that I got a lot of the tests, and they really wanted to do a test called a PET-CT, which is essentially a CT scan, but with a radioactive dye, and it shows essentially inflammation. It's for imaging for inflammation. And we just couldn't get that test. I don't know if they were really backed up or there was emergencies or whatever, but they just couldn't get me scheduled in. So the lung specialist came in, the cardiologists came in. I don't think a rheumatologist was involved at that time, but they said, "Listen, we think it's probably one of these three things." And sarcoidosis was one of the three things.
Okay.
And they said the best way right now we have to start ruling them out. So the MRI ruled out one of them, which was some sort of virus that gets in your bone marrow or something like that. So the MRI seemed to rule that out. And, but the MRI also obviously showed a drop in heart function and some scarring, which was very concerning for them. Actually quite a bit of scarring. Wow. And so at that point they said, you have so much scarring in your heart. There's no, you have to get a pacemaker. It doesn't matter what's doing this. You need a pacemaker because your electrical system is very, very damaged. It was like stage 3 AV block.
Wow.
So they gave me, I think it's an ICD. That sounds right. Which is essentially a pacemaker with a defibrillator in it. Built in.
Yeah. So if your heart stops, the defibrillator re-triggers your heart.
Yeah, or if it goes too fast.
Okay, got it. Wow.
And so they said that's happening. We're waiting in line for you to get that surgery done. But they said we need to figure out what the diagnosis is. So a lot of my hospital stay there was waiting for the pacemaker and then waiting to get a diagnosis. And what they ended up doing is they said, probably the easiest way to rule out Sarc is, or at least to confirm it, is at lung biopsy, because they can typically find the granulones or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. In the lungs. So they sent me for the lung biopsy, which they underdrugged me for, and I woke up halfway through.
Oh,
So I can remember about the last 30 minutes of the lung biopsy. And so I woke up, and you're gagging and coughing and stuff. And so I was pointing at the IV, right? Like, give me more drugs, put me out. And they're like, sorry, the anesthesiologist is gone. We can't give you any more drugs. You're going to have to white knuckle it.
well, that's the Canadian way. I'm sorry.
That's right. So they just breathe. And the nurses were great. They were holding my hand, keeping me calm and stuff. So we got through it. And they were like, well, yeah, we think we punctured his lung. Because like a lung biopsy, if you've had one before, well, maybe you don't if you haven't woken up. But essentially, when they take the biopsy, it's not just like a little snip. You've got the big tube down down your throat into your lungs, and they put both hands on that sucker and they jam it. Ugh. So I don't know how it works, but it's like being punched from the inside. And so they're like, okay, get it out, and they yank it out, and they sent me immediately for an X-ray, and just to make sure that they hadn't punctured my lungs, and they didn't. They were awesome. And then I was pretty traumatized, so I kind of passed out and went to sleep at that point. But I was very fortunate that the biopsy did confirm sarcoidosis, so it was a cut and dry, very cut and dry diagnosis, which was very lucky.
Wow. So that was that February of 2019 then? That's when you kind of started your Sarc journey.
Yeah.
I want to stop for a minute and play a portion of the song, and I want the listeners to pay attention to the lyrics here that begin with "Learn to suffer, you'll feel pain someday, and learn endurance, your strength will fade away." So let's listen to that for just a second.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday, learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright.
All right, so learn to suffer, you'll feel the pain someday, and then that stanza ends with dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace, dead man walking, counting down the days. Sounds like you were in a bad place when you wrote that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was an extremely difficult period psychologically, because to be fair, the doctors, as wonderful as they are, they're not wildly comforting. They're very clinical. And when I was in the hospital, I would try and make jokes about it and, be like, come on guys, you got to give me something here. Like, should I be calling my lawyer? Should I be updating my life insurance policy? Like, what is going on here? And they would not laugh at those jokes, and they'd be very deadpan, and they wouldn't really give you a straight answer. So it was always kind of like, you didn't really know how serious it was going to be long-term. Right.
Right.
And there's a lot of, if you Google cardiac sarcoidosis, there's some very interesting wordings that come up saying 5-year lifespan, life expectancy, right? Like, and I've since learned that what they're referring to is like the treatment, like a 5-year treatment plan. But when you read it as a layman person, it's like, oh, I don't have much longer to go here. And so thankfully I had a pulmonologist that came in, Dr. Gilson, and she was incredible. She was one of the most lovely women I've ever met in my life. And she was very comforting. And she said, go to stopsarcoidosis.org. She said, everything on there is it's very legitimate. It's very well researched. It's not fear mongering. Like it's just a very excellent resource. And at the time I was so stressed out. I mean, still being in the hospital, my mom did it, and gave me the Coles notes, but, I wanted to stay off the internet if I could help it.
Well, I think that's smart. That's one of the things that happened to me is you start reading that stuff and you just don't know. I've got it, for listeners who may be new to the podcast, I've got it on my spinal cord, which I guess I'm thankful it's not in my heart, but I'm a couple of millimeters away from losing a lot of body function. So you wonder about the next player and what's going to happen, and you start reading what other people are saying. It's really scary, and I'm hoping that the Sarc Fighter podcast tempers that a little bit by listening to real people's stories, because people can't see you, but you look great right now. You look like you're ready to go out and mow the lawn or play hockey or whatever you want to do. I don't know. I don't know that maybe you're going to be doing that at the level you're used to, but I mean, you look like a fine, healthy person to me right now.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I do feel quite good.
Good. So let's listen to a little bit more of the song. This is the song Zombie, and we are talking today with Mark Steier of Alberta, Canada, who wrote and performed this song and sent it to me. And we'll talk more about how this song might actually benefit sarcoidosis coming up. But let's listen to the part that begins with "There's no choice, try to adapt your life." Let's listen to that.
Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. With dead men walking in an instant, it could be gone. And I don't know one will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. The words potential.
All right, and so Mark, once again, there's no choice, adapt your life. We're dead men walking, and any instant it could be gone. That is the part, that's part of the takeaway that I've had with sarcoidosis is live your life right now while you can.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't, and I mean, I want to clarify the dead man walking line. I mean, when you're writing a song, you want to make it as relatable, and you want to have it fairly vague so that the most people in the world can relate to the sentiment, even if it's, not exactly their situation. I mean, whether you have sarcoidosis or a cancer diagnosis or, something in your life that's extremely trying or, gives you a sense of maybe the loss of a loved one or something that gives you kind of a sense of mortality that you've never had before. That's kind of the point of the dead man walking, is it's just to kind of it's coming to grips or trying to come to grips with the fact that, your life, you have a plan for your life, but you know what they say, you make plans and God laughs, right?
Right.
So I was lucky enough to, not really truly consider myself, somebody that was on, the brink of death, once I learned a little bit more and stuff like that. But at the beginning, and you know this, I'm sure, very intimately, at the beginning of a sarcoidosis, diagnosis, there is a ton of uncertainty because they don't have a prescribed treatment that just fixes the problem.
Right.
And they say, well, we're going to try this and we're going to do some tests. And if it doesn't work, we're going to try something else, and then we'll do some tests. And hopefully the hope is we find something that takes the inflammation down and brings it into some level of, there's never true remission, but they use the term remission when you can get the inflammation under control. And so that's scary, and it gets scarier as the first medication doesn't work and the second medication doesn't work. And, at the beginning, you can kind of take some comfort in knowing that there's a safety net, right? If the first medication doesn't work, the second medication will probably work. And if that doesn't work, God forbid, there's going to be another medication out there that'll hopefully work. But that blind faith in the pharmaceuticals starts to wane when maybe the first thing doesn't work, or maybe the second thing doesn't work. So maybe it's maybe a bit melodramatic, the line "dead man walking," but you really can feel that way, whether it's reality or not. It's kind of the emotion behind that.
Let me jump in, because when you initially contacted me, you said you went out and knocked off some things off your bucket list.
I did.
So obviously you felt like, wow, if I'm going to do this, I better do it now. What'd you do?
Well, I'm a huge, huge fan of the state of Arizona. And I think most Canadians are, because it is so hot. But ever since I was a kid, like I went there when I was very, very young. or an adolescent, and just really connected with it. I loved Sedona. I loved, the whole of Maricopa County it's just, there's a lot of beauty there, and I really like it. And I mean, if people do want to listen to this song and they find out, they kind of look at the rest of the group is called White Hot Lizards. If it's on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, we have other songs that are very desert themed. So my cousin
went to Arizona.
That's right. Yeah. So my cousin was getting married down there was it October? I think it was October. I think it was October of 2019. And so my wife and I just said, hey, you know what? Like, let's do a road trip. Let's go Edmonton, Alberta, down to Phoenix, and let's take 3 weeks and do this thing and see some stuff we've always wanted to see. And at the time, it was the first year in business, so I had some downtime. We weren't that busy that time of year. So my partner said, yeah, go. And so we went down through. We came down from Alberta into Montana, into Wyoming. Saw the Grand Tetons, which was really cool. Went down into, I think the next state would be Colorado. My American geography is going to get me in trouble here.
That's all right. Most people get the square states mixed up anyway.
Yeah, so into Colorado, and we went to Boulder, and we stayed there, which was a really cool city. I've always wanted. My wife just fell in love with Boulder. She'd move there if she could.
Great city.
And then we went to the Colorado sand dunes, the Great Sand Dunes. I think they're like the biggest sand dunes in North America. They're hard as heck to get to.
Okay, yeah.
They're way, way in the, I guess, southwest corner of Colorado.
Didn't know about those.
But they're amazing. And then we went down into New Mexico. I really, really wanted to see the White Sands National Monument, which was incredible. And then my wife really wanted to see the Very Large Array because she's a space nerd. And so we did that, and we stayed in Albuquerque, which was really cool. Silver City, we worked our way from New Mexico into Arizona and stayed there for a while. And then we went up into Utah and did Bryce Canyon and the North Rim of the Grand Canyon, Zion.
I was supposed to be there 2 weeks ago. It got canceled because of COVID.
Of course, yeah.
That was one of my bucket list things. I've never seen the Grand Canyon. And
oh, man.
So I made plans immediately once I had my second flare. I'm going to the Grand Canyon. We made all these plans. We had this big trip planned, and then COVID wiped it out. So we'll go in June of next year, as long as my health stays good, which I anticipate. I'm feeling great now. Not to interrupt your story, but
no,
it's amazing that we had that in common.
Oh yeah, I mean, that place just blew my mind. Like I can't, like down the States, like your park system is so just, it's amazing. There's so much national pride in those parks.
Right.
And it's stunning. Like it's I would use the term a religious experience being down in those places. It's so cool.
Wow.
Let
me just share this, that when I was younger, I used to go to a place in Canada, just north of Minnesota, called the Quetico Wilderness.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's amazing fishing. And we flew in a float plane, and they dropped us off, and then we paddled 110 miles back to our original destination and fished and camped the whole way. And that was sort of my religious experience. I did that 3 times. And usually in June, and the fishing was amazing. And I was thinking, wow, Canada has this great park system. And not, it's just funny how you think the other guys have it better.
Yeah. I mean, Canada's a cool place, but the grass is always greener, right? You grow up one place,
right?
You grow up in the forest, you grow up in the mountains, and you want to see the desert. You grow up in the desert, and you want to see the mountains, right? Like
Right. Well, I live in the mountains and in Western Virginia in Roanoke, and I absolutely love it here. But let me ask you this, because I think this is something that a lot of Sarc patients struggle with. So you did those trips, and you're trying to live your life. You feel okay, but you're like, man, I better get to this while I can. And you tend to force it in maybe more than the rest of your life easily accommodates. Do you find yourself kind of weighing those things?
Yeah, I think so. that trip was extremely ambitious. I think I drove 16,000 kilometers on that trip, and it was a pretty short period of time. So we pushed ourselves very, very hard, and there was days that I really struggled. And I know now, at that time I was off prednisone. I'd been off prednisone my first 6 month run of it. I was recently off, and I was on a drug called Amaran, which I think is azathioprine.
Yeah, I'm taking that now. Yep.
Yeah, and it ended up not working for me. So when I got my tests done around Christmas, they said, yeah, your inflammation's as bad as when you're in the hospital. We got to put you on something else. And also back on prednisone. So
that stinks. How many milligrams of prednisone?
They started me on 60.
Yeah.
And then I was on 60 typically for about 3 to 4 months, and then they'd start weaning me down. I would spend a little bit of time at 40. So I'd go from 60, wean down to 40, spend a little bit of time at 40, and then wean off 5 milligrams a week, basically, until
I know that drill. I started at 80 and weaned off. So it took the best part of a year to get off prednisone. How were you on prednisone? Did you gain a lot of weight? Did your face get puffy? Were you cranky?
Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have the insomnia problems a lot of people had.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did find, because I took it in the morning, on 60 milligrams or higher, like you get a buzz. Like you get like almost a boost in the morning. It's like a super strong cup of coffee. It gets you going, but then by noon it turns on you. But I got the big hump on the back, which I'm still waiting to go down this time around. The moon face is starting to go down a little bit for me now that I'm only at 2.5 milligrams right now.
Okay.
So I gained, between the 2 prednisone runs in the last year, I gained 45 to 50 pounds.
Wow.
And part of that was like when you're on prednisone, you're hungry you're just ravenous
all the time.
And you're not ravenous for vegetables and fruit. You're ravenous for chips and chocolate and pizza and and you're also really stressed, right? Like, a lot of people have problems stress eating when they're upset. And I'm a prime example of that. I unfortunately probably could have exercised a little bit more self-control. So the prednisone definitely is the main culprit, but it was a tough time emotionally too. And unfortunately, I'm a man that likes to eat his feelings from time to time. And that's been really, really tough. And now I'm trying very, very hard. I started a running, learn to run 5K program. We bought a treadmill, and I've been cycling. My dad got me an e-bike, which was incredible of him.
Yeah.
So that I can cycle with my wife, because she loves road bikes. She could cycle all day, every day.
Me too.
And I was always afraid to go out with her, because I was just like, what if we get like 20 kilometers out of the city and I get tired and I can't make it back? So, there's just been a lot of support that way. But swinging back to, the hiking and the travel, in the north rim of the Grand Canyon, I just had a particularly bad day. I was just struggling immensely to keep up, and sweating really badly and stuff. So, there was a lot of inflammation there. And even though the pacemaker does its thing to hide a lot of those symptoms, you still can feel quite unwell when you're on Sarc and have a lack of energy and stuff. And I felt very guilty. I felt extremely guilty, because I felt like I was holding my wife back, because she had always wanted to see these places too. And we had to limit, how ambitious we were with hikes and stuff. But, but that's not reality, right? That's not really how your family members and your loved ones feel about you. But, you have to try and keep some of those emotions in check. But yeah, it can be really hard.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were extremely athletic, and maybe used to being the person walking at the front of the line and not the back of the line. Is that true?
Yeah, it depends on the activity. I was always pretty good at hockey and burst type sports. Not so much endurance running or cycling or anything. I was always a heavier kid.
Okay.
So I was always kind of used to being the fat kid and being at the back of the line. But yeah, it was a huge drop in the fitness from where I was, 2-3 years before to my diagnosis. It was certainly an upsetting drop.
Can you play hockey anymore?
There's nothing physically preventing me from playing hockey, but the doctors really don't want me to do it, because hockey's, as a goaltender, you're obviously getting frozen, cow pies shot at you at 1 billion miles an hour. And when you have a thing in your body that will shock your heart,
Right.
They don't really want you in high contact situations, because they're like, you're gonna not have a good time if that thing goes off on you while you're playing. If it gets hit with a puck right in the right spot, or you get tackled into the net or whatever, the leads can get disconnected. Potentially it could go off. And they said, just call it, retire, find something else.
Right. I want to listen to another portion of your song, Zombie. Again, we're talking with Mark Steier of Alberta, Canada, who has written a song based upon his experience with sarcoidosis. And I want you again to listen to the lyrics that begin, "Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too." And let's listen to that.
Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you. And whatever happens, please remember right now belongs to you. Whoa.
So, Mark, it says, wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. Whenever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you. It sounds like this is the advice you're giving to people that maybe has worked for you. And I think it's something that, based upon my own experience, my conversations with other Sarc patients, everybody is trying to get to that place.
Yeah. And I don't know that you 100% get there. I think that line is more about, whether you're dealing with something like sarcoidosis or even depression, right? Like, it's anytime there's difficulty in life, you have to try and find not even a silver lining, but just little things and appreciate them, right? And that's a constant challenge. I don't think as human beings we're really wired to do that, at least not in this generation. We're very focused on what others are doing, and we compare ourselves to others with social media and stuff like that. It's a very, it is what it is, but it's tough to put a smile on your face because, this one little thing happened today, or, for whatever reason. Like for me, I've taken to just really enjoying animal life a lot more. So whether it's the birds in the backyard, I call them the fat birds, little sparrows, or just, on Instagram, I follow a business out of Idaho called Black Bear Rehab. And it's just these like adorable little black bears, and they post videos and stuff all the time. And, just little things like that aren't really consequential things, but they can put a smile on your face. They can change your mood a little bit. So there's that aspect of it too. But what that really is more than anything is a shout out to family and friends, that were there and have been unconditionally supportive. And no matter really what's going on, and no matter how bad things might seem, those people are there, and you can always count on them and reach out to them. And people are always willing to, if you turn, the situation around, that it's somebody that you love that has this thing instead of yourself, and you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, I would cross oceans. I would, do whatever this person that I love and that I care about. But for whatever reason, when it's ourselves, we feel like we're a burden, or we're letting people down, or those people, there's a limit to their love, right? And you can't do that. And so that line came from I think it's an Irish blessing that I had heard. I don't know if it was from my great grandpa or whatever, but I heard it somewhere in the past, and it just kind of clicked when I was writing the song. I said, like, how am I going to finish this? How do I put a positive spin on this otherwise dark song? And so I Googled it, and unfortunately in its actual, the actual thing is syllably, from a syllable perspective, it doesn't really work with the melody. So I ended up changing it and kind of personalizing it quite a bit, probably to the point where no one would recognize it. But that's kind of where it started. So, the lines about friendly smiles and, wherever there's happiness and sunshine, those are typically not lines that I would write, because they're out of context, maybe a little bit cheesy. But I thought, it was just kind of a universal thing. I mean, the Irish are fantastic at their toasts and their blessings and their
right.
So obviously it's something that's connected with people before. So
right. Well, I think you think it's cheesy, and it talked to me. I'll tell you that. And I think that song takes you right down the sarcoidosis path, from the fear to acceptance to an opportunity to see how to come out of it. And that journey is what you've just described to me in this interview, whether you realize it or not. And so philosophically, maybe you don't want to give yourself credit for it. I appreciate that, but I don't hear cheesiness in that. I hear inspiration and solid advice. I just wanted to tell you that.
I appreciate that.
Sure. So now you've written this song Zombie, and you are, obviously a very talented musician. Some of these listeners can't see that I'm talking to you right now, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 electric guitars hanging on the wall behind you, and there may be more out of the view of the camera. I suspect there are.
There's a few more.
Okay. So hockey and music are your thing, but why don't you just tell everybody how you would like this song to maybe raise some money for FSR, what you were thinking when you sat down and wrote it, and how you produced it.
So the music itself for this song was written before my diagnosis.
Okay.
It was actually, we had the song more or less composed musically. And some of the songwriting credit needs to also go to my friend Nathan Woodward and his wife Jenny McFarlane, who are fantastic musicians, and they helped me kind of piece the pieces together in a cohesive way. So I got to give them a lot of credit. But I was having trouble putting lyrics to it. There was a couple of ideas that I had, but just nothing felt right. And after my diagnosis, because just like down there, our tax season is March and April. It's super busy for accountants. If there's any accountants listening, they know what I'm talking about. So when I got out of the hospital, March 1st is when I was discharged. I immediately jumped into work. So I had no break. I was working, 60, 70-hour weeks immediately after. Thankfully, I work from home. So I was able to manage that a lot better and be more comfortable. But so after busy season, after April 30th hit, my parents were actually down in Phoenix, spending a couple of months down there. They're semi-retired now. So they were renting a place down there, and they said, you know what, so they were calling me and they're like, you sound horrible. Like, we're worried about you. Just fly down and spend 5 days with us. And so I said, okay, you don't have to ask me twice. I'm going down. And so when I was down there, I had a lot of time. We didn't really, normally we hike and we do stuff. And that time I was just kind of sitting by the pool and just, lounging around and feeling sorry for myself more than anything. And then one night I started writing it, and I got the two verses written and an idea melodically for the chorus. And then when I got home and I showed it to my friends Nathan and Jenny, they said, yeah, you got to run with this. It's awesome. These are, just keep working on it. And yeah, over a couple of weeks after that, I finished working on the lyrics and kind of got them polished to the point where I was happy with them. And I felt it got the message out. And I guess to answer your question, the message is exactly that. It's a journey through the process, right? From the beginning, the song Zombie is how you feel after something like that. With sarcoidosis, you have lack of energy. When you're on prednisone, you feel bad, you're gaining weight. That's a direct line, a direct reference in the line, feeding and stumbling. You're just eating constantly. You have no energy. you have a brain fog going because there's a level of kind of depression that goes along with being hit with something like that. And then it kind of goes through like, okay, this is the reality. I guess I got to learn to deal with some of this stuff. You're trying to keep up the pace. That's the line is referring to trying to live at the same pace you were before, right? Whether that's going to the gym every day or you're trying to do the things that you know and love and struggling.
And you can't do it.
And you can't. And then, when you go into the I guess the pre-chorus and the chorus of the song, it's, my friend Jenny describes it as the young man frustration, that you can just clench your teeth and ball your fists and just, juggernaut your way through difficult situations. And, but you can't do that with this sort of a thing. It actually is the other way around. You have to have that compassion and, so the chorus is kind of, the fear that I fight and all that stuff is very, I guess is kind of reflective of that frustration. But then, it's again, but I'm still upright. I'm still, that's the refrain at the end of the chorus. It's like, I'm still standing. I can fight this. I can still live a good life. Mm-hmm. And then, the second thing is like, it's coming to accept it. And try and find a way to come to terms with that. And then the end of it is that, okay, now you have to really look at the little things in life and still find meaning and value there. So the message is that at least for me, is that it's a journey, but it's also kind of a constant battle.
Right.
And
So
whether it's other patients, your family or whatever, you've got support.
Yeah. Okay. So now this song, you're trying to raise some revenue from the song. You want to donate that to FSR. And we will play the song in its entirety at the end of the interview, just so folks know. But if people want to somehow donate, or how does the song make money for FSR? Yeah,
and you know what? I haven't initially, before I heard your podcast and felt that, okay, I should reach out and see if there's a way that we can. I said in my initial email, I'm just not a self-promoter kind of a guy. It's maybe not the best trait for a businessman or a musician, but I just feel uncomfortable doing it. But I felt, by reaching out to you and potentially getting on the podcast and sharing my story, that it's more about hopefully kind of helping other people. And anybody that knows anything about the music business, just streams don't typically earn a ton of revenue, but it does earn some. And, so my thought initially was, let's see how much traction we can get on this song in a year. And then at the end of the year, hopefully, we'll have raised a couple $100 in streams or whatever, just whatever it is. I'd like to donate that, to SFR, because it's, they're doing what they're doing is helping all of us immensely. And again, it's probably a pretty small drop in the bucket, but with these things, the more people that are raising awareness and that are raising funds and stuff, it all adds up, and it's all going towards a good cause. So at this time, I don't have a GoFundMe or anything like that set up. If people like the song, and I would just encourage them to donate directly to the SFR.
Well, I would say, and I'm just spitballing here, so if people are listening, I don't know if this will come to pass, but one of the things I've done is they have when people do a 5K or whatever, they have this KISS account that you can create, kick in to stop sarcoidosis. So I created a KISS account, and I encourage people to donate to that. And I actually have a little public service announcement that runs sometimes during the podcast where they can donate to my KISS account. And I used, I didn't use the KISS account, but I also did a bike ride last year and raised some money that way, but that went through a different path. So perhaps, and if you do decide to create a KISS account, I can put that in the show notes. And that could be a way for people to just click on that and make a donation.
After this, could you email me a link?
I will.
I will.
Yep. And it's right on their website too. It's
Okay.
right on the FSR website also. So
I
I'll
will
send
set
you-
that up, and I'll post it on the White Hot Lizards Facebook page, and then perhaps we'll connect and you can share it on your Facebook
Sure.
page, whatever, so it's easier for people to find. But yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, and I would encourage, once we get all that set up, I would encourage all of our listeners to push it out on their social media, because this is a song that it's an instrumental, just a guitar in the background and you singing, and it's not, it could appeal to just about anybody, no matter what their taste in music. So, it's not hard rock, it's not rap, it's not something that could be defined as something, outside of people's typical musical parameters, as it were. It's just very easy to listen to. So, and that song that we're talking about again is Zombie. So, all right. So, in retrospect, why don't you just give us kind of some final thoughts on where you are? You're a newlywed, you started a new business, you're fighting this thing. You've done some bucket list things, but you're also upright and doing okay.
Yeah, like I said, I feel for a lot of other sarcoidosis patients out there. Like whether if you get caught early enough, it's actually funny that my father-in-law has sarcoidosis in his lungs.
Really?
Go figure. Yeah, he and I didn't know that. And when I got diagnosis, he's like, "Oh, I've got that," and we were like, "Really?" I mean, he's fine. They caught it quite early, and he has some scarring and stuff, but he's off medication now, and he's doing good. But it's a thing that yes, it's a rare disease, and it's not a particularly well understood disease, but it does affect a lot of people, and unfortunately it's a mean son of a gun in the sense that it goes after organs that are kind of really important. Whether that's your spine, your nerve system, include I would include the spinal cord in that, in the nervous system. It goes after the brain, it goes after the eyes, it goes after the heart, it goes after the lungs, it goes after the skin, and oftentimes not just one, typically two or more. So it's a mean disease, and thankfully it's morbid. But when I get really down, I say, well, at least it's attacking organs that you can get transplants for, right?
Right. Yeah.
And not everybody can say that, right? And it's so I feel very, very fortunate, even though the heart is one of the more rare places that it attacks. From a lifestyle perspective, the pacemaker does its thing. I'm used to how that feels now. I hopefully Imuran and azathioprine didn't work for me, and now I'm on a biosimilar called infliximab, which a lot of people don't know a lot about that drug, and it can be very intimidating, just because it's a very expensive drug. Like the Remicade is the brand name version, and it's very expensive. And
yep, I've taken that too.
Yeah, and you have to go and you have to get injections, and I've heard people online with Crohn's, which is often treated with infliximab, that have said, man, it feels like chemotherapy. It feels like you're going to to get chemo done, and you having had chemo done, maybe you can speak to that. But it's an intimidating thing. But the reality of it is for most people, and for myself, it's a fantastically unobtrusive drug. Like you feel good on it. There's very few side effects. So I feel very, very fortunate that I've been able to continue living my life, with shades of what it was before, and that I feel generally okay. But yeah, it's a horrible disease, and it's a process. And I think the key is, regardless of the diagnosis, is just try and keep your head up and try and find that joy in every day.
Yeah, because you never know.
And one other thing I would like to conclude with is I stay off the internet. It's just my thing. I would just I'd be beside myself all the time. But on Facebook, and my mom is a part of this group, and she kind of keeps an eye on it for me. But it's one of the sarcoidosis support groups. I think it's the cardiac sarcoidosis support group that she was a part of. And that's from what I've heard, and what she showed me is an incredible group. There's a lot of people out there that are extremely supportive and are happy to share their stories. And And when I was in the hospital, and I won't name any names, obviously, but my mom joined that group, and she was reached out to privately by another member who was also a mom. She was an ex-nurse, and her son, almost detail by detail, had the exact same situation that I did. And it continued, the parallels continue to be uncanny. He was a little younger than me, but he's more or less recovered now entirely. The same drugs that didn't work for me didn't work for him. You know, the timelines were very similar, and she was so supportive and just so incredible. And, you know, I can't thank her enough. That was such a comfort during a difficult time for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's all about. This podcast, I guess, is the audio version of that. A place where people can gather, where they can hear other people's stories, where they can discover what other people are doing and feeling, and how the various drugs are working, and knowing that sometimes it's hard to convince yourself that you're not being lazy. It really is the drug. You just can't do what you used to be able to do, but you think that you are just rationalizing. So I don't have to do anything today because I don't feel like it. When in fact you really, this is what happens to everybody, and it's good to know that it's not just you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark Steier, thank you so much for your song Zombie. Thank you for sharing your story and your insights and your inspiration with all of us on the Sarc Fighter Podcast.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here. Really appreciate it.
Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you. And whatever happens, please remember right now belongs to you. Whoa.
We've heard the song now in bits and pieces, and before I play it in its entirety, let me once again thank Mark for reaching out and bravely sharing his story. It's not easy. I don't understand, by the way musicians make money from songs online, but I hope you will listen and maybe share it on your social media, share it within your sarcoidosis community with your friends if it somehow helps you explain what you can't put into words about how you feel some days. And I will mention that Mark has opened a KISS account, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis, where you can donate directly to FSR, maybe as a way of thanking him for his song or showing appreciation for his efforts, his craftsmanship, what he is going through. And if this is something that motivates you to say, well, I've been looking for an excuse to maybe make a donation to the foundation, this might be a great one. And you can just click on the link to his KISS account, and all the money goes straight into that account, and then straight to 100% of it to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. And of course, all my information is there in the show notes as well. And again, if you have a story to tell, please reach out and let's talk about this. We can talk about diet. We can talk about a multitude of other things related to sarcoidosis. Maybe you have a success story related to sarcoidosis. I'd love to hear that. Haven't heard many of those. So whatever it is, you can contact me, and all of my contact info is in the show notes. The best thing to do is just send me an email. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep fighting.
It would be so much easier to grieve If I had a breath to breathe, I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on to fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. With dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. The worst potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on to fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you. And whatever happens, please remember I